My name is Carol Reese. I am a master gardener. I have been a master gardener for 20 years. I am going to talk today about starting a spring garden. Oddly enough, it's time. First thing you do is plan. The most important thing on your list of things to do when you're starting a spring garden is location. Location, 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 just like every other piece of real estate. You want 6 to 8 hours of sun per day. You want availability of water. If you're going to be carrying a 5-gallon bucket of water across the yard, it's not going to be pleasant. And then you want good soil. Good soil has tilth, 3 to 4 inches. A good soil combination, well, the best soil combination is 25% air, 25% water, and 50% mineral content. That'll be and organic material. If you can stick your finger down in the soil, it's good. You got a good start. People will scream about clay, how bad it is. Clay's got a lot of nutrients in it. If you add enough organic material to your clay, it will give you excellent results. If you listen to people and let them tell you to put sand in your clay, you will get concrete. Clay and sand makes concrete. So, organic material, organic material, organic material. Unfortunately, organic material breaks down over time. In the meantime, it will, as it decomposes, it will give off humic acid, which will break down the attraction between molecules in the soil and free up the nutrients in the soil for your plants. So, organic material, organic material, organic material. The way to test your soil, and a good time to test is right now, is you take samples from several spots in your soil planting area, several spots in your garden area. You go to several different spots. You go down about 4 inches. You remove the organic material off the top if you're doing it for a lawn. 4, 5, 6 spots. Dig a little shovel up. Put it in a bucket. Mix it up. Take it to the ag center and put it in a box. They'll help you. They'll put it in a box. They'll send it off to UT to be tested. You can put down what you intend to grow, and they'll tell you what you need to add to that soil to be the most successful. And they'll send you a report. It'll take a couple weeks if you do it now. If you wait, it'll take much longer because there'll be a whole lot more people doing it. Now's your preparation time. Also, preparation time includes getting your seeds, figuring out what you want to grow. Do you all know where your extension office is? Okay. Ag Center and John Rice Boulevard. It's the building in the front. This is the best ag center I've ever seen, just saying. This one, the one right here. We are so lucky to have that facility here. 6 to 8 hours of full sun. Availability of water, irrigation, area with flat surface. So even if you build raised beds and you put them into an inclined area, the top of that raised bed needs to be flat. You need to level it so that when you plant your stuff, your water's not running down. It will carry your seeds and anything that's on the surface, including your organic material, off the top. Raised beds if necessary. Raised beds are excellent. They're also expensive. These are your cool season vegetable examples. You can start planting, according to your seed packet, you can plant these seeds in your garden now or soon. Our frost date in this part of the country is April 16th. But your cole crops, your cabbages, your broccoli, your radishes, they will all take a good degree of frost. When you look on your seed packet, it will say 55 days to harvest, or whatever your seed packet says. Since these crops can take cold weather and a lot of times they can take a little bit of frost, you can plant them earlier when it looks like it's going to frost if you want to protect them or speed them up a little bit, keep them from suffering too much. You can put a cover over, or a floating row cover, or a milk jug if it's something, one individual plant you're worried about. or a sheet. Just don't let the sheet or the cover that you put over your plants crush them, but you can put a cover over them, and that will give them 10 degrees of protection. A row cover will give them 10 degrees. So if the temperature goes to 20, they'll think it's 30. Not a huge amount, but better than nothing. We have arugula, beets, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, collards, carrots, cauliflower, celery, chard, fennel, kale, kohlrabi, lettuce. I don't know what mizuna is. I think it's Oriental. Could be from Asia. Mustard greens, onions, bok choy, peas, potatoes, radishes, spinach, coriander, which is also cilantro. Anybody have any questions on this part? Cole crops, cabbage family, includes cabbage, broccoli, kale, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and collards. The seeds will germinate in approximately a week and may be sown in a protected garden bed about a month before our last frost date. If the weather's still chilly, cover the plants with a row cover or a cloche to keep it warm. That would be a cloche is the expensive glass cover that you can buy, but you can also use a milk jug with the bottom cut out. Beets. Plant beet seed directly into the soil once soil temperatures have reached 45 degrees. That's a good point. What we're talking about when we talk about temperature is not your air temperature. We're talking about your soil temperature, especially for your summer crops, not necessarily your spring crops. If you put summer crop seeds in the soil or summer crop plants in the soil before your soil temperature is the appropriate temperature, which is usually around 70 degrees, the plants will rot. They'll just sit there. They won't grow, and they'll rot if it's wet. So it's best to wait until your temperature of your soil is the right temperature. Now, you can change the temperature of your soil if you would like by either digging a hole and letting the sun heat up the hole, or digging a hole and putting fresh soil that you've kept warm someplace else, like the garage. But it's really best to wait until the sun is and the weather outside is on your side. But 45 degrees Fahrenheit, light or loamy soil is preferred. Plant seeds a ½ inch deep and 1 inch apart. Beets can be sown indoors about 4 to 6 weeks before transplanting. Roots and greens are edible. I'm not a fan of transplanting plants with large roots. Anything that you're growing for the root, the beet, the turnip, the radish, just because that's a lot of stuff to accommodate transplantation. You'd be better off waiting and put the seed in the ground when it's time. Carrots, again, that's not a plant I would transplant, but you can. They sell plants for transplanting. I worked for a company that did sell plants for transplanting carrots. Although carrot seeds need an average around 14 to 21 days to germinate, they can take as long as 20 to 35 days if the soil is not warm enough. The ideal soil temperature for germination is between 70 to 80 degrees. Under the right conditions, the seeds should germinate within 7 to 10 days. You can speed up germination in any of your seeds by soaking them beforehand. When you soak your plants in advance, now beans are a summer crop, peas are a spring cold weather crop. You can plant your peas in the spring, then you can plant them again in the fall. You'll want to use something called an inoculant. Inoculant is a powdery substance. It's brown. You mix it in the water, you mix it with your seeds, and it's got nitrogen in it. It's powder, it contains nitrogen, it contains inoculant. It contains the bacteria that will fix nitrogen in the soil for the consumption of your plant. So when you pull up a bean plant or a pea plant and you see little bitty white nodules on the roots, that's the symbiotic, or that's the bacteria growing on the roots of that plant, providing nitrogen to that plant. The atmosphere we breathe is mostly nitrogen, a little bit of oxygen, but plants can't use that nitrogen until it's fixed in the soil. So we want nitrogen, we want inoculant. Celery. Celery prefers fertile, well-drained, organic, sandy soils with lots of organic matter for best growth. Celery needs relatively rich soil. Fertilizer or compost should be worked into the soil. Typically, celery is started from seeds indoors and transplanted. Again, we don't have a big old root for celery. And the way they make celery white instead of green is they pull it up and as it matures and they cover it so that you don't get green celery, you get a more translucent, clear, white, not white, but less green celery. Swiss chard, great plant. Direct seed into garden into early spring. Seeds can be started indoors 5 to 6 weeks prior to transplanting into the garden. 50 to 70 days from direct garden sowing. Space seeds 2 inches apart in all directions. Cover with a ½ inch of soil or an inch of sandy soil. Thin plants 4 inches apart. High requirements for nutrients, either from soil, organic matter, or fertilizers. Incorporate compost or fertilizers before planting. Side dress as needed. Again, organic matter. Organic matter, organic matter, organic matter. Sorry to be repetitive. Fennel, this is a great plant, but it's got quite a bit of root. I would plant it later in the spring. It smells like anise. There are more than one variety. You have a bright green variety, which is your standard garden fennel. Then you have a bronzy colored fennel, which is superb. It's beautiful. Both of them are great as an herb. They're great as a seed. You can use them in cooking. But what they're really super for, in my small estimation, the butterflies love them. Monarch butterflies love them, and the swallowtail, the state butterfly of Tennessee, loves fennel. They will lay their eggs on the plant and then they'll come and eat it, form little chrysalises. Fennel's a very close relative of dill. They like both of those plants. And there's nothing cooler than seeing butterflies all over your plant. Sorry, if you want to eat it yourself, I apologize, but there's nothing cool. I grow the fennel just for the butterflies. Sow seeds in the spring once soil's begun to warm. Now, we don't have just one day of planting here. We got a range. The threat of frost is past. Soil temperatures 50 to 70. Choose fertile, moist, well-drained soil. Fennel does best in full sun. Soak your fennel seeds for a day or two before sowing to help ensure better germination. Direct sow your seeds. Kohlrabi. This is a great plant. Direct seeded kohlrabi in the garden from mid-April till early May. Avoid planting kohlrabi where you have grown related crops, broccoli, cauliflower, collards, kale, turnip, rutabaga, cabbage, mustard, bok choy, Brussels sprouts during the previous 4 years. Usually that's because the pests that would be attracted to all those plants are still in the soil. So that's why you rotate your crops. That's why you rotate your tomatoes, is the nematodes numbers keep growing and growing the more you plant tomatoes in the same spot. And in order to lessen those numbers and not give them food, you plant your tomatoes over here and let them grow over there for a while, and then you have them come back. Best quality kohlrabi is sweet, crisp, and juicy. Fast growth without heat or moisture stress results in a good crop. Again, you don't want your plants to go without warmth. Not much control over that other than covering them. And you don't want your plants to go without water. Water's a big one. If you get a freeze, if you're looking at cold weather or a freeze, and your plant can tolerate a bit of cold, and you water your plants, the water will give off heat as it freezes, and it might be what saves your plants. I mean, that's just a little tip. Yes, ma'am.
What is it tax like?
I want to say turnip. Is anybody like a crunchy turnip? Yeah, like a sweet, like a slightly sweet, not a less tangy turnip. It's good.
Yeah, they're very good.
Harvest kohlrabi when the bulb is 2 to 3 inches in width. If the bulb gets too large, as with many types of this plant, when you get a bulb or something like that, it gets wood. The older it gets, the more woody tasting it gets. Which, if you want fiber, that's great. Go for it. Lettuce. Semi-hardy annual plant. Withstand light frost but needs protection against heavy frosts or freezing. Sow leaf or butterhead, as soon as soil can be worked in the spring or in late summer. Crisp head and cos types, romaine types, may be transplanted in early spring. Tolerates partial shade. This is one of the plants that will tolerate partial shade. I apologize for looking at this when I should be looking at that, but sorry. Baby leaf lettuce can be grown entirely in indirect light in summer. Days to maturity 40 to 80 depending on the type. Lettuce is another thing that can be grown in the house or on your deck in a hydroponic type environment. You can grow a nice crop of lettuce either indoors or in a place that you wouldn't think that you could grow lettuce. Mustard greens, plant mustard green, that's the same yellow thing you see growing in all the fields out there every spring that the goats have been on they're not interested. Plant mustard greens during the cool temperatures of spring and fall. These tasty greens grow well in raised beds, containers, and in ground gourd. You just need to check your soil moisture regularly and water when the top inch of soil becomes dry. I'm not a good greens eater. Onions, I am a good onion eater. Onions, in the garden, onion and shallot sets can be planted about a month before your last frost date, as well as sown for a fall crop. This is your sets. Usually people plant sets. They're not willing to wait for the results from seeds, but you can also grow seeds. They're edible, but I've been told that by a good friend that he used to eat them every day on his way to school in West Virginia out of the ground, and he got sent home every day that he ate them because his breath was so horrible.
They're strong. They're strong.
Yeah, so you can eat them, but you know what? The bunnies don't care. But onions and garlic are very closely related. Now, if you're going to plant garlic, you plant that in the fall. And you can plant the garlic that you get in the store if you want. Yeah. Or you can plant any garlic from any source. You just break the little cloves apart and you stick them down in the ground. I got a bunch growing in my flower bed right now. There's nothing wrong with planting vegetables in your flower bed, y'all. Nobody's going to know. And there's a whole class of flowers called allium that is actually onions. And they have spectacular flower heads, just magnificent. And then when they die, they have a skeleton of plant material. You can, there you go. You can spray paint it. But onions are great for a spring garden. But the sets, not the seeds, guys. Sets, not the seeds. Peas, one of the best. All the peas, the snap peas, the flat peas that you use in stir fry, cooking, all the peas. This is one of those that you want to get an inoculant for, though, because they will fix nitrogen. Any plant with a pod that looks like that, similar, it can be a big pod, little pod. Any plant that has a pod is a legume. They fix nitrogen in the soil. It's good for not only that plant, but every plant that comes along behind that plant. So pods are good. Legumes are good. High in nitrogen, which means they'll also be good source of protein for you. Good growing conditions are between 55 and 65. Peas need less fertilizer than other crops because when people say, when fertilizer packages say that you're feeding the plant, it just irritates me to death. That plant is feeding itself. And in the meantime, while it's feeding itself, it's feeding every one of you. Fertilizer is just like a vitamin. It's a nutrient to the plant, but the plants are feeding themselves. That's what photosynthesis is all about. So don't listen to that stuff. Yeah. Peas, plant peas as soon as the ground is thawed and the soil is workable. Enjoy. I have planted with ice crystals all around my fingers. I hope you enjoy it too. Peas should be refrigerated as soon as they are picked. They will keep for about a week. Potatoes. We in Ohio, the last time I planted a big garden of potatoes, it was many years ago. We planted on Good Friday, or the day before Good Friday. I would have to check to see the optimum date, but my mother was an organic gardener, and she really followed the little Roday book that said, you know, here's your moon sign and here's your date. So, and I did what Mom said. Cut potatoes into 1-inch pieces, making sure that each of them has the little eye. You want to set those out and let that outside of that piece harden or form a callus. So you leave it sit in the house for a day, 2 days, or in the garage. You're just not out of the weather. Plant in the soil which has been amended with organic matter to make it more light. Harvest in 90 to 120 days. You can also plant potatoes in a container where you just take a little bit of soil and a whole bunch of leaves, put your potatoes in there, and as your potato plant grows, you keep filling in more soil. Just keep going up, and you'll get more and more potatoes. I'd like to say that there is nothing in the world that tastes like a potato that you just dug out of the dirt, the soil, and cooked. It's magnificent. And they have a bunch of containers that are like bags, and you can plant them in there. Radishes, love radishes. They do best when grown in cooler conditions and are tolerant of cold weather. Loosen the soil before planting at least 6 inches deep, a foot or more for long types. That's not right. No, you just want to put your radishes in at the surface. I think they're talking about the daikon radishes that get super long. Daikon radishes are also extremely hot. And people have been known to plant daikon radishes to loosen up the soil in their gardens in preparation for planting other crops. Daikon radishes can get that long that they break up the soil for other stuff. Plant seeds from April through early May and again in August. Again, yeah, that would be right. Our frost date here is April the 16th. Drought stress can cause the roots to develop poor flavor and rough texture. Harvest garden radishes 3 to 5 weeks after planting. So you want to make progressive plantings on these because you want to harvest, eat, harvest, eat, harvest, eat. You're not going to be able to unless, I don't know if you can dehydrate them. Has anyone ever dehydrated radishes? So just harvest as you go. Spinach. Sow seeds a 1/2 inch deep, compress gently into soil and water lightly. Seedlings emerge in about 7 to 14 days. Soil should stay below 70 degrees for good germination. And when seedlings are about 1 to 2 inches tall, thin them to be about 4 to 6 inches apart. You can harvest the leafy vegetables by taking the outside leaves and eating them, and then letting the plant progress, and then taking outside leaves and eating them. And if you're growing it to young spinach, you don't need to thin. If you're growing it to eat the young plant, you don't need to thin. Cold map. A lot of plants and a lot of seed packages will show you on the back of the package, they'll show you a map that's based on the cold temperatures in the United States and in your area. And that's great. That shows you when you should plant for the cold. There's also out there a heat map, and you should probably pay attention to that one also. The cold map will show you what's the coldest temperature that plant will withstand. The heat map will show you what the hottest temperature that plant will withstand, and both of those are important. We've ignored the heat map for a very long time. It's in your interest to pay attention to it. Weed control. Mulch is great, and if you use an organic mulch, what you put down this year becomes part of the soil for next year, which is super. Only trouble is you got to mulch more next year. Pine straw, wheat straw, wood chips. You just want to make sure that your straw or whatever you're using is weed free. If you use hay or decomposed hay, there's still going to be active weed seeds. So essentially what you're doing is planting weed seeds. Now my all-time favorite weeding is a flame weeder. There's nothing more empowering than having a stick with a huge fire flame on the end of it, making a sound like this. It's a very good feeling. They're not hugely expensive. They're well worth the expense. And they're also great for getting weeds out of little crevices, like sidewalk crevices and things like that. When you flame weed, you're not burning the weed. You're boiling the water into leaves. So it may take several attempts to actually kill that. But it's not very labor intensive. You're just carrying a flame weeder around. It feels good. Pre-emergent is usually a chemical. Now, what happens in the soil with your weed seed is the seed germinates. They say it's a pre-emergent, but what happens is the seed germinates, and then this chemical gets into the root of the weed, and it prevents it from being able to take water up. So it prevents water uptake, and that kills it. And I've not seen that pre-emergents are really bad for any, even though it's a chemical, and a lot of people are against chemicals. I've not seen any negative use of pre-emergents. Now, if you have an annual flower garden, if you have an annual vegetable garden and you use a pre-emergent, there's nothing that it'll still affect the seeds you're planting. So in that, it could be a problem. Chemical weed killers, that's after the weed has germinated and is growing. That's your Roundup or any other chemical weed killer. And then hand weeding. Good luck. Here's the references. I try to emphasize any website that's got the ending .edu is an extension website. That's information based on science produced by universities across the country. Okay, questions? Comments? Thank you, guys.